All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down the security rabbit hole to another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Buckle in, get that chin strap nice and tight. This one's gonna be a good one. This show has been known to stir the proverbial pot every once in a while. I figured, what the hell? Let's go have another fun one. So I invited somebody I've been following on LinkedIn for a minute. And he is a purveyor of snark and well-placed comments, Mr. Jonathan Rao. Jonathan, give the people a little introduction of yourself, and then we'll rock and roll.
Yo, it's good. Happy to be here. We were going to stir a couple pots today. So what's going on, everybody? I'm Jonathan. I'm the VP Distinguished Engineer at Query.ai. We're a security federated search platform. I've been in industry for, I don't know, almost a decade now. PM, product manager, TAM, program manager, director of offensive security, AWS, nationwide, IHS. I'm also the author of an open source security posture management tool, Electric Eye. And, I like to say some spicy things on the internet sometimes, but PG-13.
I like it. This is my kind of conversation. And we were talking before we hit record. One of my favorite things to watch when I'm feeling like just watching things blow up is Adam Conover's Adam Ruins Everything, and I figured Jonathan ruins data science and SIEM or something. This will be a good one. So, all right, where do you want to start? I caught you on a thread a while back. You want to recap that? Do you remember the thread?
A bit. I mean, I'm coming off of like 3 weeks of PTO, so I don't even remember how to do my job, to be honest. But
look,
yeah,
there was some
SIEM died again.
Yeah, there's some conversation about SIEMs, their place in security and analysis, more or less. And you had made a comment to the effect of, "Hey, look, SIEM's still dead, but the good news is there's nothing better." Something to that effect.
Just about. I mean, SIEM, I guess, is undead by now, but I feel every year the SIEM gets murdered to death by something, right? I mean, in the early days, it was QRadar, and then folks running scripts on top of the tools when we used to have system admins and people actually putting patch cables in the Cisco routers and things like that. And then it was, Securonics, and then Exabeam and UEBA, and behavior analytics is going to kill it. And then folks started to look at data warehousing and then quickly realized it was a horrible idea and then moved back to SIEM. Then SIEM got enterprisey and it got cloudy, and there's cloud native SIEMs and native security and XDRs. And I don't know, this industry, it never ceases to amuse me with all the acronym and the different vernacular to refer to something. But yeah, SIEM died again. There was some contraction. Cisco bought Splunk. I think Logarithm and Securonics got smushed together. CrowdStrike's a SIEM now. Microsoft has been a SIEM with Sentinel. They've renamed it 5 times by now. It's a mess, but it's one of those things that'll never go away fully, kind of like an IDS, IPS. Like, those things never die, no matter what. Like, they're still kicking around out there. But I think there are definitely options to do it a lot better, which is good. And you could keep the SIEM for its intended purpose and then put everything else, like the fancy pants analytics and most security data science, and put that somewhere where it actually freaking belongs. Like, I don't know, Spark clusters and thing.
So Anton Chivak has been saying this for a minute too, is that the SIEM is kind of undead, right? We're on like the next generation of SIEM. It started as a good idea that I don't think really ever fully developed before we went to the next gen. And then we thought about what that could be, started building and said, nah, screw it, let's go next gen. And I think, look, when I first heard the term a million years ago, and you all know how old, I'm old and snarky. So back when like ArcSight was brand new, back when QRadar was brand new, back when Splunk was brand new, like when all these technologies were just nascent, just getting out there. It was going to, the whole point of this, Jonathan, was to take data from here, correlate it, and then tell you something about it. Why has that been such a catastrophic cluster? Beep.
Well, security teams aren't data teams, and even now, when they call themselves data teams, they're still not. The SIM almost was a band-aid for that, where Carl, the ancient lich who worked in system administration, was writing freaking Bash and Perl to help you move specific syslogs or event logs off of a specific box for you. The SIM kind of turned the calculus on its head, like, hey, instead of having freaking Carl the Leech woken up from his eternal slumber, why not give security teams a mechanism in which to move a lot of this more, commodity at the time, right? Like signature-based antivirus, you used to have to plug those freaking things in with floppy drives, early versions of IDS, early versions of IDS, tar pits, remember those SMTP tar pits when email servers would get taken down, and then like really rudimentary AppSec tooling and WAFs and RASP and thing like that. So I think we definitely outgrew the capability of the SIM, but then we also outgrew tools. I mean, now it's pretty simple to have like 70 tools in your freaking repertoire as a security
70.
leader, like
70.
easy. Yeah, easy game to do 70.
Yeah, I was gonna say that happens in like a quarter usually.
I mean, like when I was CISO at
I think the numbers are in like the hundreds now for average security.
Yeah, I think IPC or IPG, one of those analyst companies, I think they said 77 was like the median amount, but it could get higher.
It's still a lot.
I mean, it's still a lot. I think it's like 50 too much, but I was CISO at Lightspin, and if you actually itemized all the individual security things, we were an E5 customer. We had some Slack, and then Slack Enterprise, I think, is technically a security tool because it's DLP. And then we had the AWS stuff and some Kubernetes and container security solutions. And then we were also dogfooding the Lightspin CNAP, which became Panoptica, and CNAP is its whole craziness. I was probably, if you itemize it, like at 40 tools just from turning a couple things on and swiping somebody else's credit card. So yeah, I mean, you're in multiple clouds, and all of a sudden you got hundreds of tools. If not hundreds of tools, you have hundreds of sources of telemetry. I mean, take Okta, for example. Okta has 918 freaking events just in their audit log. CrowdStrike FDR has 1,118 or something like that and counting events in FDR. So even if it's just one tool on paper, between that and like the native API alerting you pull out, there's not a platform out there that could handle it, nor should it. And that's the other part, that SIM never dies, because security folks are hoarders. We're the wrong type of data people. The data scientists and data analysts and engineers on like the quote unquote business side, right? Like folks who build, I don't know, demographic forecasting for freaking perfume purchasing. Like they get the exact amount of data that they need, and then have some SLA to meet to make sure the pretty pictures show up in the dashboard for somebody. Security is like, oh man, APTs, Russia, ooh, shit. Oh, whoops, can't say that. Oh, oops. Whoops. Ooh, we need to save all 15,000 of these log events because you never know. The Russians might hide a T-72 in the freaking packet, so we got to make sure. So I think to wrap it up, it's like a bunch of things compounding on each other. Our tooling has moved too far ahead. Our telemetry has moved too fast. There's a huge skill gap. The SIM has been recreated 7 times, like you said, and we have no idea what we actually want to do with the data.
So, look, we've tried going from the SIM, which was, you're right, kind of a band-aid solution, because we never really had. When I did this, the IPS had its own console.
Yeah.
The email gateway had its own console. The forwarding proxies had their own console. The AV had its own console. Everything reported to itself, to its own thing. And then to understand what was actually going on, you had to literally put everything on different screens and look at it at the same time.
Yeah.
And as a human being, like that's we don't function that way. No.
I
mean, most of us don't. There are people that do.
Yeah.
There are few and far between, but I don't. Like none of the people in my team did that. So we needed a SIM to go, hey, this thing ties to this thing over here, and holy cow, if I put these things two together, then this all makes sense. But I think what happened was, both the scale of the amount of stuff we were stuffing into the SIM, because you're right, it became log everything, and once you turned log everything on, right? I suspect that the SIM manufacturers and then the disk storage companies had maybe something to do with that. Let's store everything. Let's just turn all logging on. All logging is good logging. It's like, well, and then and look, the Sims became overloaded, bloated, slow, and effectively lost the ability to do what we initially created it to. So then we had to create filters and tuning parameters and this and what, tuning is just code word for ignoring stuff that you should be looking at, right? I mean, if you have given, if we say let's say that it's a given that these platforms are they're not completely crap, right? Which means if it highlighted something for you, there's got to be some value in you reviewing it as a human being. Where did, from a data science perspective, like how do we get back to that? Because we've, like the original premise I think was good. We abandoned it and then we all went to data lakes and all that stuff. And I don't think that solved anything. It just gave people more credit.
No, I think the data lake thing should have came first, right? There was a big jump in with, you explained the different consoles for everything, right? And then there was the concept of the UTM. You remember that, the Unified Threat Management Tool, which was kind of like pre-SIM, but also post-SIM, like I guess the NG SIM v1.0, if you would. Folks tried to do something like that where it's like, oh, let's just grab all this data. And you could find dissertations and, academic papers going back to, probably the 90s, but relevant stuff like in the early 2000s for sure. When compute was a lot more accessible for folks, virtualization, talking about using like k-means and k-nearest neighbors and, other sorts of like forecasting and seasonality, anomaly detection really, because that's all anomaly detection is. It's an anomaly in a time series, and it's an anomaly because either it doesn't match seasonality, it doesn't match, login patterns, whatever. And folks were trying to just shove everything into there, and then it quickly, became like, oh, we need to tune the results. It's like tuning is what you should be doing first. But the data science part, what you should be doing first is like, what problem am I trying to solve? I have a mantra, kind of dug into my head by my former boss at IHS Market before we got acquired by S&P Global, Eric. And Eric was always like, what? So what next? And it's almost kind of like you have to work backwards from that and be like, what's the so what? Like, why do I need to run a giant Spark cluster and pull petabytes of data to find login patterns and find logins from different IPs? What does that give me that I can't do already? Because you're right, the SIM out the box, just turning on basic stuff, your guard duties, your crowd strikes, your Defender E365, XDR, ABCT, QAF, whatever they're calling it now, right? They work. Like, they have to work. They work somewhat. Like, they're going to help you.
They do. I mean, otherwise people, they wouldn't be a thing, right?
Yeah, like, unless you're doing something like pants on head stupid, they work. So it's like, well, if this works and this is already telling me about superhuman travel and DLP and Bobby Tables tried to, access freaking Carmen Electra's, super secret stash of data in the company share drive, like, do you really need all the fancy data science stuff? And it really goes also to SIM tuning or hydrating data lakes or whatever pretentious way we want to talk about moving data. Why do you need it? And that's why I also hate the term threat intelligence, right? Because it's like, is it intelligence? What data are you turning into information, and what information are you turning an intelligence product to support an operation? And what operation are you doing? Like, what's your job? So I think you have to fix that. And that's, a lot of people, when I say that, they're like, oh, I wanted you to tell us about what model to use. No, stupid. I don't care what model you use. You need to ask yourself, like, take a look in the mirror and be like, hey, dummy, why are we collecting all this data? Why are we building these models, hosting these endpoints? And I think that's really what's going to come back to. But now let's say you do have a need for that, right? I know of a company out there who does a petabyte a day easy just on EDR data. Not to mention their sign-in logs, not to mention, kind of the lateral movement. And they're very, very particular about intercepting, kind of lateral movement actions on the objectives, because they've gotten hit before and they can't have that happen again, right? If you think to folks like Kelly Shortridge, I forget what her last name is. But she writes about, do breaches really impact the bottom line? No, until it happens twice for the same reason, right? So if you have a reason to do the data sciencey stuff to support this giant freaking scale, and that's the only way you could do it, because your SIEM and your EDR vendor will immediately fall over trying to, give you, telemetry or give you actionable intelligence based on what's going on in the environment. Then, now you could get in with the data science stuff, but then it goes back to SIEM, right? You need to tune the data. Do you need all 70 freaking fields from your Octologs? Do you need
That's
all
the thing.
right?
That's the
Like,
thing, right? I feel like security is on this hamster wheel where we devise better and better ways of making ourselves blind so that we can look cool, giving ourselves sight again. Here's what I mean. Turning on when you were logging certain fields, when it was just antivirus, right? When we were logging just certain fields into the SIEM from our semantic parent servers, how far back this goes, right? I could tell you which systems were getting viruses on them, and then the SIEM itself would devise sort of patterns for us. And it would say, well, all of these, this group over here you created is now 60% compromised. Like, well, that's interesting because that group is by itself. So something's happening over here, but all these are not. So there's something happened between them and there that's not allowing this thing to go through. Okay, that's interesting. But this whole notion of like, hey, let's turn everything on, much like let's encrypt everything, which arguably not, like on its face sounds super great for privacy, great for bad guys. Like it's all good. Like there's no downside to it except for the fact that you can't see anything, like actually what's going on. So now we got to go back and we got to go break the encryption, which is interesting. But think about it this way, right? So we went simple correlation of basic logs to logging everything and blowing the SIEM completely just sky high, right? It just started crawling like, oh no, we got to filter what we're giving it. Okay, fine. So you filter things down, but now we're logging, everything, and we're trying to find, like the whole notion was to go beyond what the individual siloed technology could find. Right. And I like that cause. Like I signed up for that cause because that was a good idea. Because while the IPS was telling you, well, this is interesting, but not necessarily bad, you correlate that with like the WAF, which was saying like, hey, that's really strange. And the results are really strange. And you couple these things together, you're like, somebody should be looking at this right now. And because we're humans, like looking at both those dashboards. But I feel like that's sort of a failure. Like we created a new technology product domain because the other things that we had simply didn't work together. Yeah. And to make matters worse, Jonathan, because the SIEM didn't solve all the problems, we created and I just lost the thing on top of it.
No, the UTM.
SOAR. We created SOAR.
Oh, SOAR. Oh God, that's SOAR.
Because the things look, in theory, on paper, this looks great. Device A sees one part of the picture, device B sees another part of the picture, sends their data to device C correlates, notices a pattern, tells device D to tell these other things out here to do something. Great idea. Why did none of that work?
It works for one use case, right? I think that's like the litmus
it worked
test.
In the lab, right?
You start a project and it works in the lab, and we had something like this. I worked at Blue Cross Blue Shield in New Jersey, and previous to me coming there, probably a couple of years, they had somebody break into the building, steal a bunch of stuff. State AG got involved, like a bunch of people got involved, and it was like, hey, you need to fix your security. Then they bring in the hammer, like the scary CISO, like the real security CISO, not somebody who wants to be on the board and wants to be liked by the other executives. No, like a real dyed-in-the-wool security guy. And we had all those stuff, all the fancy things, tore out ArcSight, brought in Splunk, put ES on top of it, brought in Phantom right before Phantom got bought by Splunk. We had logging coming from everything. Anytime you swiped a key card, anytime you used an RFID chip, it would track your every freaking movements, correlate it back to ERP, correlate it back to the ITSM tools, full end-to-end visibility. And then we rolled something out like that. And it worked great. Like, hey, yeah, if you have somebody who's trying to key in more than like twice in someplace they don't have access to, security would show up and be like, what are you doing? Why are you swiping this? And it's like, oh, oops, I was trying to get in the meeting room, right? Like, it was kind of dystopian in a way, but that sort of like end-to-end cyber physical security story worked. But that's usually what happens. You spend a lot of effort doing this like flagship idea. If you have a flagship idea, sometimes you just toil meaninglessly, which is what happens. And that's why there's so much burnout in the industry. I mean, there's a lot of like people with like legit issues because of these reindeer game, BS that goes on in big security shops, even small security shops, like one-man CISO teams to 100-person security orgs, right? And it doesn't work because, it deals also with the inputs, right? And it goes back to, why did we build filters? Why did we build summary indexes? Why did we keep expanding Apache Lucene? Why did we keep coming out with UEBA and next-gen this and SOAR that? Because we weren't doing our due care really downstream to bring in exactly what we needed. Because it could work. I mean, that's really what the SIEM was. It started as an IT observability play. Like the original Splunk article, I think in like 2005 in CRN, when they used to print those things and it would have them in like GameStop and stuff like that. And I remember reading that like younger and be like, the hell is an SIEM? What is this? I thought I thought I was cool for like, using like rudimentary like Kali tools to like break, Xbox Live, right? And like pull people's IPs from the room. Be like, I got your IP. Gonna come over there. We're gonna tie you up, bro. I'm a super hacker, bro. Right? So that sort of stuff, the data science, the big flagships don't work because we have really crappy inputs. Because we've kind of lost the art. And I love the comment before where we're making ourselves blind on purpose, just so when we pull off the blindfold or hop off the hamster wheel, like, look, everybody, I hopped off the hamster wheel. I'm so great. I escaped. I broke the wheel. I broke the cycle, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that even goes back to more industry BS about like context, right? Like the CNAP and graph technologies. A graph is purpose built for relationships, and security somehow managed to break it and burn everybody out of it. Like, we're terrible people. Why do we keep doing this to ourselves? And to answer the question, I really don't know why it doesn't work. There's a million different things, right? We don't have the right inputs. We don't bring the right data, or we bring too much of the data. We don't have a system. We don't have context, or we have too much context, or we have context that doesn't matter. Like, does it matter what the cost center of the business unit of the division that owns the box and the technical owner and the business owner? Like, what are you going to do? Email the freaking SVP who runs a $2 billion P&L? Be like, hey, bro, your server has an IPS doo-doo NGAV SOAR UEBA on it. What are you going to do about it? They're going to fire you.
Yeah.
Or they're going to send people to your house, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just this, I don't know, never-ending cycle of making life a lot harder than it needs to be. And it doesn't have to be, because it works if you don't put everything into it. Like, I think that's the first thing, is like, just stop putting everything into everything and then scale it back from there.
How much blame do we give for the mess we find ourselves in, for the never-ending parade of new vendors and new tech? And quite frankly, I blame some of the analysts for this, because like, there's always got to be a new magic quadrant, and a new acronym that they have to have a winner and loser in, so that they could get paid to advise those companies, and like that loop just continues.
I mean, it's, I guess, more meta commentary, right, on Western civilization about how like lobbies and whatnot works, right? Like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. I give you money, you get a board observer. You leave industry to work for an analyst, and then we tell you what to write about, so you could go and advise to these people so they could pay you, and then hopefully the top 3 in that category exit, right? And look, I get it. Like, we're in the federated search spot. It's kind of new. There's going to be a lot more people jumping in a federated search, right? They're going to be nipping at our heels, and hopefully we're the #1 guys, because I want to buy a tank. I want to buy a freaking Su-29 and do donuts. Like, I want a Ferrari. I grew up not with much. My parents, worked hard, but I'm from the Bronx. We lived in an old 30s tenement, for God's sake. Like, I want nice things too, So it all becomes a necessary evil, and maybe that's the problem, right? Where we're just all kind of looking at this material stuff that doesn't really matter, right? Because the Su-29 will break, and the T-72 will pop a coolant leak, and my Ferrari will get wrapped around a tree, and when I'm too old, I won't drive it anyway, right? So I think there is that kind of whole analyst pipeline. There's probably like a greater philosophical thing that we would either need another episode, or it would just scare too many people if I started talking about it. But it's also, I don't know, just the search for silver bullet where, I don't know, we just, it's like we are a Russian freaking combined arms infantry formation. And then it's like, ooh, look, here's the buildings with the SOAR in it, and then let's blow it up with thermobaric rockets. And oh no, I can't stay in the building, it got blown up. Oh, let's move over to UEBA. Oh, UEBA building got blown up too, I can't stay here. Oh, let's go to that building, let's blow it up. Right? Like, that's kind of what we've been doing. And it's just, we just destroy all these product categories, and we want these tools to do too much. I mean, perfect example of CNAP. Just look at Wiz. Wiz is 70 tools in one.
Yeah.
Who needed all of that?
They got like a $1 trillion valuation, right? They had by far the biggest most bad booth at RSA. Like, it was glorious, and at the same time just awe-inspiring in a way that I don't think they intended it. I looked at it and went, holy cow, this is how you blow $1 million. All right. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a mythology to it, and maybe that's what we're chasing, and it's the wrong thing. Instead, because nobody wants to go on LinkedIn and talk about this boring thing they wrote, and everybody's like, oh, look at this loser, you got 90 impressions, nobody cares. They want to talk about this graph, CNAP, data science-y, data lake, omni table thing that they're working on, and everybody's like, oh, how you're so smart and cool. And it's like, I'm not. I got into security on accident. I was on a bomb squad, man. like I got out and I was like, crap, what do I do? And somebody I was in the military with who transitioned out was like, oh, be a project manager. That's easy. You have soft skills, and that's all that really matters. You just got to chase people. I was like, how can I chase people if I don't know what their job is? I'm like, well, let's learn their job. And I'm too broke to go to college, so let's just Google it. And then I became a product manager, and then I somehow got into security, and then, a director. I'm at AWS, and I'm a CISO, and now I'm a VPDE with the fancy title and everything. I still don't know what's going on.
Jonathan, I want to peel this back. All right, 2 minutes. Let's solve this thing. Where do we go? I'm joking. Where do we go from here, though? If I'm going to give you 2 minutes on the clock. Where do we go from here? Because we got metric shit tons on my podcast. I'll swear if I want. Metric shit tons of security tools. They all make mountains of data. They can tell you everything if you just know how to look for it. How do we solve this? How do we keep from being CDK all over again?
Oh God, and CDK. I hate CDK.
I think everybody hates CDK right now.
Yeah. First off, stop what the F you're doing. Like, they need to freeze, hold your positions, hold the line, stop it, ceasefire, grab your CISO by their face and squeeze. I don't care, your SOC manager, they're asking you for 70 more detection rules, put him in a standing DARS choke, squeeze him out, throw his unconscious body on the floor. Like, stop what you're doing.
Wow.
maybe without violence. Look, the government doesn't want you to the government doesn't want you to do it, but I give you permission to do it, okay? Which won't work on defense at all. But stop what you're doing and be like, all right, and take account of what you got, right? Like, isn't that the basics, like Security 101, like, find what you got? How can you defend what you can't see? That used to be a good mantra, and then it turned into a stupid marketing trope. And I don't even mean count servers, right? Like, we're not building a CMDB. It's not 2008. There's automated ways to do that. But why do you have all these tools? What are you doing? Like, what are your analysts searching for? Like, maybe talk to them, talk to your analysts and be like, what's your day-to-day job? Because I feel like even in a security team, you could be so far removed from the reality of the situation. And, even start from the top, like, What's enterprise risk saying? What's your regulatory environment? What is your business? What do you do? Do you sell products? Are you B2B? Are you B2C? Like, what is it that makes the business run and what are they scared of? And they probably can't articulate it all that well, but they could get you some, effigy of articulation for telling you like, okay, we sell widgets to Acme Co. and we need to make sure that nobody does something to the widgets. And it's like, well, that's not a cyber problem. But maybe it's like, hey, we run, business to customer email campaigns. And it's like, yeah, we don't want something to happen with the emails. We don't want that customer list to be exposed, right? And then look at your tools and be like, okay, do these solve for that out of the box? Are we using it out of the box? Or are we just plumbing the data out? Do we have our poor security analysts becoming data engineers and just shoving all this stuff out somewhere into a SIEM? Does the SIEM have out of the box rules? Are you playing freaking MITRE ATT&CK bingo? Like your thing should be to figure out what you're doing and eliminate all the reindeer games, all the redundant tools. And I don't care how painful it is. Like, oh, but offboarding the tool is so hard. Yeah, life is hard, dummy. Like security isn't easy. You were making it harder on ourselves. Once you eliminate all the graft and the corruption and, corruption, once you eliminate all the waste and then focus on, okay, what are like the 5 big things that the business is worried about? Can we actually solve for this or show back something that, hey, nobody's actually getting into the email list. We're thwarting them. We have the right countermeasures. Then you could start building out from there, right? Like security folks are smart. I think across the board, we all have a different approach, but we're probably analytical, like to be problem solvers, hopefully, unless, your CISO got promoted from like sysadmin or whatever.
Which happens.
But yes. But yeah, I think you focus on those things, eliminate all the BS, and then you'll be good to go. And boom, fixed, easy, right?
Yeah, that advice is akin to many years ago. Somebody came in during a sales pitch and said, "Well, I can help you. I can get you about halfway through the CIS 20." I was like, "Cool. 1, that's a lie. 2, no product can. 2, that's like a 10-year project." So easy is relative. Listen, I don't think the SIEM's going away anytime soon. I think we've kind of talked ourselves into that. I think if we can settle down and figure out what it is it's supposed to be doing for us, I think it ultimately is a useful piece of kit. It's just once again, I don't think I'm going to say anything revolutionary here, but we're expecting something that it was designed for feature A to be doing B through Z, and we're mad at it because it's not predicting the future. And you're like, well, that's not what we built this thing for. And anyway, well, it was fun having you on the show, man. We have to have you back again sometime. This was a good discussion. Lots of good segues we can have.
Yeah. We went for declaring the SIEM dead. We resurrected it and then started talking about philosophy and government corruption. Whoops.
There you go.
We're on a list.
Dude, it just adds it. Just like,
yeah.
At this point, you're gonna have to take me off of lists, okay? Like, we're on so many lists, it doesn't even matter anymore. All right, folks. Jonathan, thank you for being on the show, folks. Thank you for listening. If you have opinions, and I'm sure you do, you're welcome to share them. Get on the LinkedIn page, voice your concerns, voice your thoughts. It's kind of quiet on there, so it'd be good to hear from you if you think you've got an answer or you want to rebut something I or Jonathan said, and obviously drop in your opinions. Everybody has one. I'd like to hear yours. So thanks. We'll see you guys again another time, another place on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Cue that music. We're out of here.